Greetings, good people. It is day 26. I have the lights off because we are going to do a zoom in, and I've had the flashlights on the zoom in cultures for about 3 minutes so that we can get a good look at them. We will start with what we're all the most interested in, which is the Big Kahuna. So that's the 16-liter new tank, which I believe is about 5 days old now and was watered down about 50 or 60%. Let's go see how it's going in here. We got high hopes for this tank because, oh dear, doesn't look very good, does it? Okay, yeah, down there is some stuff. So that's at least something. And you can see that little guy's moving. Okay, so at least we know that there is life in the tank, though it's not particularly easy to see. This is certainly not a thriving population, but it's not dense. It kind of looks like the coconut oil tank looked 3 days ago. Like it's got life in it, but not much. Here they are. They're starting to show up now. That's the problem with these plastic tanks, right? You can't see in them properly. But yeah. There are some swimmers in there. You can see them. But it's certainly not a dense colony. Okay, so the Big Kahuna's alive, but not really kicking. Not really giving us a lot of rotifers to see. I can see a few, but not a lot. I think that's a little bit because it's a bigger tank and it's harder to see them. I think it's a little bit because it's a cloudier, scratchier surface, so it's harder to see through it. And I think it's a little bit because the population just isn't very big, which is disappointing. Maybe we're not getting good enough distribution of the food with our light bubbling. Maybe I need to stir it more, or maybe it's doing better than it looks. We don't know, but that is disappointing. Okay, moving on. We're going to put this over here so that we can go look at that guy after this one. But next, let's go have a look at coconut oil container. Now, remember, coconut oil container is our second container ever, but it started with a 10% solution, filled all the way up, crashed down, and then 2 or 3 days ago, I'd emptied it down to 10%, poured it all into the baby tank, and then filled it up with cloudy water from the baby tank in the hopes that the rotifers would breed in it. So coconut oil container is doing better than it was 3 or 4 days ago, and has essentially responded well to having the wastewater from the baby tank put in it. The cloudy wastewater we presume is either diatoms or a bacterial bloom, but either way, my understanding is that adult rotifers anyways should be able to eat them. And so that's what we're hoping for. It does look like this population is doing slightly better than it was in the past, or a few days ago. Yeah, this population does look like it's doing better than it was a few days ago, and like it has responded well to the addition of the waste cloudy water. So that's great news. Also, if you just look at their swimming behavior, it looks a lot healthier than it looked before. So I'm very pleased with this. Now, let's jump over to the other experiment here, which is this guy, our glass jar number 3, which was also watered down to about here because it was very healthy. And because of its excellent health, we used it to inoculate other containers and yeah, get more rotifers in the rest of the system. Then we filled it back up about 75% with wastewater from the baby container, which once again was that cloudy water. Now, I am nervous that that cloudy water might have some copepods or some pathogens that could hurt the rotifers, and then that would not be good, which is why I have not given it to all the rotifer cultures yet. And so this is 2 or 3 days since adding this water to all of these, to the coconut oil container into this glass jar. The glass jar got it later than the coconut oil did. And the glass jar, I think, had a higher rotifer density than the coconut oil jar did to start. So it does make sense that the glass jar is doing better, and you can see it's doing quite well. Like if all of my tanks had this level of rotifers, I wouldn't be overjoyed, but I would be pretty satisfied. Like this is good enough to call, you know, a rotifer colony, a decent rotifer colony that has a few more days of growth in it, but isn't necessarily insignificant. You know, like a couple hundred per liter. So I'm pretty pleased with this. Now, as to whether or not they are responding well to the cloudy water addition is still up for controversy, because they've only been in here for 2.5 days with this new water, and it should take them 3 days to get through a full breeding cycle. So we wouldn't really see a good doubling until about day 4, or at least day 3. Though this might be an indication that the smaller rotifers have grown up and that the adult rotifers haven't died from it. So I do think this is going well. If we come back in 2 or 3 days and this is doubled again, then I get to do what I really want to do. And what I really want to do is take several liters out of the very, very cloudy baby water tank and pour it and water it down with 1 liter of fresh RO water to get the salinity down, and then drip that whole thing into here. And then I could essentially water down our wild card Big Kahuna bottle, you know, up to here, purely with wastewater from here, and I wouldn't even need to feed these guys because they should be able to feed on the cloudy water coming out of this tank. So it's a win-win. I get to reuse wastewater. I get to get my Big Kahuna filled up for free, essentially. And we get a huge rotifer boost across the board. I will point out, too, that the rotifers in this tank are doing well. But the rotifers are doing okay in this tank. There are more rotifers in this tank than there were before. They appear to be breeding and populating in this tank, so they are taking advantage of this cloudy water, too. So that's great news. So yeah, that's what I would really like to be able to do, but that is not allowed until we see this tank doubling. And then finally, the last solution to be looking at here is our original solution. And we are not allowed to add the cloudy water to original solution no matter what. So let's see if I follow through with my own rules on that one. But essentially, yeah, this is the original Epsom salt container. It's been watered down at least 3 times now. It could really use a watering down again, but I just don't have the salt water available. And from what I can see, this colony is probably fine, but not great. This one is always gets underestimated because the cloudy water makes it look worse than it is. But currently, I don't see much of anything in here. Let's just do a proper zoom in for good measure. And yeah, I don't know, this sure looks like it's crashed to me. Looks like there's nothing in here. So much for being our best colony. But every time we empty this into a glass jar, we're always surprised by how much is in here. So it's not toast. But I mean, you guys remember those early videos where we had all kinds of cloudy white stuff swimming on the sides of these tanks. Okay, good. So we can see a few rotifers coming into view now. You can see a few things moving. So this is not a total collapse, but definitely population way down in the original tank. So now, to overview here, we are 4 days away from 1 month. At the end of 1 month, I wanted to have essentially one of these 5-gallon containers. That's a 4-gallon container, but I wanted to have a 5-gallon container essentially full of rotifers. That was a long shot, considering I started with 500 mils, and that 500 millimeter colony was fine, but not packed. You know, that's quite a stretch goal, I think. But I also think you could do that. I also think from 500 mils, you could fill 5 gallons in a month with the right recipe and the right bubbling. And if I had have not done all the splitting work and had to just put 5 gallons of salt water in here right from the start and thrown in the rotifers and the TW1800 and a couple pellets of yeast, I imagine that would have been a better outcome than what we did here, which is starting with small batches, doubling, and doubling. However, my doubling method, I believe, is probably the safer and more conservative method, because, you know, if we had to just dumped everything in that one container, then it's putting all your eggs in one basket, as they say. So that wouldn't have been the right move, especially since we can see actually that the 16-gallon isn't really performing either in comparison to the other ones. Hilariously enough, our best performer might be this one, and that might just be because we can see it better. I would say, in reality, I think this would probably be the best performer if we didn't screw up by overpopulating it and letting the population crash somewhere around day 14. But you know, lesson learned, right? But I do think that they breed fastest in this one. And it's also easy enough to see through. So hooray for the Costco coconut oil container. That is my favorite, my favorite miniature plastic fish tank for the time being. But yeah, we're 4 days away from a month. I would give myself a C- here. We'll see how we're doing at the 1 month mark, but it would be great if I could double up the salt water in this and then take the wastewater and put it in both of these guys. And then I don't know if we should just put more fresh salt water in that one, or if we should risk putting the wastewater in. You know, you kind of want to keep this as pure as possible, since we know our original isn't doing great. These are our only two pure cultures left. But it's a tough trade-off between purity and success, right? And success is measured by total population, not necessarily by purity, at this point anyways. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. Pretty neat times.